March 17, 1945, 04:30 hours. A farmhouse cellar 6 kilometers southwest of Remagen, Germany. Lieutenant Daniel Kowalski sits at a wooden table with a field map spread before him, illuminated by a single kerosene lamp. The map shows the Rhine River, bridges, roads, and a circled objective. A railway junction marked Ziel A, target A around him. 12 men from his reconnaissance platoon check weapons in near silence. M1 Garand. Thompson submachine guns. Grenades secured to webbing. Radios tested and retested. The air smells of gun oil and damp earth. Kowalski's orders arrived by courier at 02:00 hours, typed on official paper, signed by the battalion commander. The mission: infiltrate 3 kilometers behind German lines, observe the railway junction, assess enemy strength, report back by 08:00 hours. Authorization to engage if necessary to complete the mission. Expected opposition minimal. German forces in the area were assessed as disorganized and withdrawing. The platoon has been ready for 90 minutes, equipment checked, routes memorized, passwords confirmed. They wait for Kowalski's signal to move out. He studies the map again, tracing the route with his finger. The line leads through a forested valley, across a creek, up a ridgeline to the objective. He does not give the order to move. The lamp flickers. The men remain still. The mission scheduled to begin 5 minutes ago has not begun. Kowalski's platoon was part of the 78th Infantry Division's reconnaissance element. They had crossed the Rhine 2 days earlier, exploiting the capture of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen. The division was pushing east, attempting to expand the bridgehead before German forces could mount an effective counterattack. The railway junction designated as Target A was identified by division intelligence as a potential staging point for German armor moving to reinforce defenses along the Rhine. Reconnaissance reports from aerial observation suggested minimal activity at the location, but ground confirmation was required. Kowalski's platoon received the mission because they were positioned closest to the objective and had experience conducting deep reconnaissance. The terrain between the farmhouse and Target A was mixed: open farmland for the first kilometer, then dense forest covering a creek valley, then a gradual slope to the junction itself. Weather conditions were favorable, overcast with scattered fog, providing concealment but not limiting mobility. Temperature near freezing. Ground firm enough for movement without excessive noise. The platoon consisted of 13 men, including Kowalski. Most were veterans with 6 months to a year of combat experience. They had conducted similar reconnaissance missions in France and Belgium. The procedures were familiar: move in 2-man teams at staggered intervals, maintain radio silence until contact or mission completion, withdraw along pre-planned routes if compromised. Intelligence briefings provided by division suggested German forces in the area were remnants of units mauled during the defense of the Rhine. Estimates indicated no more than company-strength opposition scattered across multiple positions. The railway junction was believed to be held by a small security detachment if occupied at all. The assessment concluded that a platoon-sized reconnaissance element could operate in the area with acceptable risk. Kowalski had received his orders in writing, which was unusual for a reconnaissance mission. Typically, such missions were briefed verbally with map references and radio call signs. The written order included specific language about authorization to engage enemy forces if necessary to complete the mission. This too was unusual. Reconnaissance doctrine emphasized avoidance of contact whenever possible. U.S. Army reconnaissance doctrine in March 1945 emphasized stealth, observation, and rapid withdrawal. Reconnaissance elements were not intended to fight through enemy positions, but to gather information and report it to higher command. Engagement was authorized only when necessary for self-defense, or when surprise enabled quick neutralization of threats. Kowalski had been trained in reconnaissance procedures at Fort Benning in 1943. The doctrine was clear: observe, report, avoid combat. But operational realities often differed from doctrine. In practice, Reconnaissance platoons frequently encountered situations requiring immediate tactical decisions. A guard post blocking an approach route. A patrol crossing the planned path. These situations demanded rapid assessment, bypass, withdraw, or engage. The mission to target A was straightforward in concept. Reach the railway junction undetected. Observe from concealment for 30 minutes. Count vehicles, identify unit markings, assess defensive positions. Withdraw and report. Standard reconnaissance procedure. The platoon had executed variations of this mission a dozen times since crossing into Germany. But the written authorization to engage created ambiguity. It suggested that division anticipated possible contact. It implied that completing the mission, reaching the objective and gathering information, was prioritized above strict adherence to avoidance doctrine. This placed tactical decision-making on Kowalski. He would have to determine whether engagement was necessary and proportionate. The men understood the mission profile. Sergeant Frank Hoskins, Kowalski's platoon sergeant, had briefed the squad leaders while Kowalski studied the map. The route, the objective, the rally points, the withdrawal plan. The men knew what was expected. They had prepared accordingly: extra ammunition, grenades positioned for quick access, radio frequencies confirmed. At 04:25, Kowalski stood and walked to the cellar stairs. He looked up at the darkness above. The platoon would move out in teams, 5-minute intervals, assembling at a checkpoint 500 meters east. From there, they would move as a single element through the forest. He returned to the table and looked at the map once more. His hand rested on the folded paper containing his orders. He did not pick them up. He sat back down. The men continued waiting. 04:35 hours, 10 minutes past the scheduled departure. Kowalski remained seated at the table. The map is in front of him. His men are ready. The route is planned. The objective is clear. He does not give the order. Sergeant Hoskins approaches, stands beside the table, says nothing, waits. Kowalski looks at the map, at the circled objective, at the route traced in pencil. He picks up the written orders, reads them again, the authorization to engage, the priority placed on completing the mission, the assessment of minimal opposition. He sets the paper down. He asks Hoskins about the last radio check with battalion. Hoskins confirms contact was good at 04:00 hours. Standard situation report. No changes to mission parameters, no new intelligence. Kowalski stands, walks to the stairs again, listens. The night is quiet, no artillery, no small arms fire. The front line is 6 kilometers west. The area between here and there has been cleared by advancing units over the past 48 hours. The route to Targeta should be clear. He returns to the table, looks at the map, at the junction, at what is marked there, a railway junction. Buildings indicated by small rectangles, roads converging, a strategic point. He folds the map, puts it in his pocket. He looks at Hoskins. He tells him the mission is cancelled. They will remain in position until dawn, then return to battalion. Hoskins asks if there is a problem. Kowalski says no. No problem. The mission is cancelled. Inform the men. Stand down to 50% security. Hoskins acknowledges. He moves to the squad leaders and relays the instruction quietly. The men remove equipment, set weapons aside, sit against the cellar walls, no questions asked. Orders given, orders followed. The mission does not begin. The platoon remains in the cellar through the rest of the night. Half the men sleep while half maintain watch at intervals. Kowalski sits at the table. The lamp burns low. He does not sleep. At 05:30, Hoskins asks if Kowalski wants him to radio battalion and report the cancellation. Kowalski says no. They will report in person after dawn. Hoskins does not press the question. He returns to his position near the stairs. The men who are awake speak in low voices. They do not discuss the cancelled mission. They talk about mail call, about rations, about rumors of German surrender. The conversation is routine, the kind that fills waiting time in combat zones. The cancelled mission is not mentioned. At 06:00, the first light appears through gaps in the cellar ceiling. The darkness transitions to gray. Kowalski tells Hoskins to prepare the platoon to move. They will return to battalion assembly area. Standard movement procedures. Hoskins organizes the men into travel formation. At 06:30, the platoon exits the cellar and moves west toward American lines. The route back is direct, across open farmland, then along a road secured by advancing infantry. They encounter no resistance. By 07:15, they reach the battalion command post, located in a village school building 3 kilometers from the Rhine. Kowalski reports to the battalion operations officer, a captain named Morrison. The conversation occurs in a small room that serves as the operations center. Maps cover the walls. Radio operators work at tables. Morrison asks for the reconnaissance report on target A. Kowalski states that the mission was not conducted. He canceled it before departure. Morrison asks why. Kowalski says he assessed the intelligence as insufficient to justify the risk. Morrison looks at him for several seconds. He asks if Kowalski is refusing a direct order. Kowalski says he is reporting that he made a tactical decision not to execute the mission based on his assessment of the situation. Morrison tells Kowalski to wait outside. Kowalski exits the room. He stands in the hallway for 20 minutes. His platoon is outside, waiting near the vehicles. He can see them through a window, sitting on the ground, smoking, checking equipment. Morrison emerges and tells Kowalski to return to his platoon. The mission is not being reassigned. The platoon will remain in reserve status pending further orders. Kowalski acknowledges and leaves the building. Kowalski's decision to cancel the mission was not based on fear or inability. It was based on an assessment that became clear only as he studied the map in the hours before departure. The railway junction marked as Target A existed on the map. The coordinates were precise. The aerial photographs used by intelligence showed buildings and rail lines consistent with a junction. But Kowalski had operated in this area for 2 days. He had observed German withdrawal patterns. He had noted that division intelligence consistently overestimated the coherence and organization of German forces. The written order authorizing engagement suggested that division anticipated opposition at the objective. This contradicted the verbal briefing that had characterized the mission as low-risk reconnaissance. The contradiction indicated uncertainty at higher levels, uncertainty about what was actually at Target A and what the platoon would encounter. Kowalski calculated the risk. If the junction was lightly held or abandoned, the mission would succeed with minimal danger. But if intelligence was wrong, if German forces were stronger or more organized than assessed, his 13-man platoon would be committed to action 3 kilometers behind enemy lines with limited support available. The authorization to engage created additional risk. It implied that division wanted information regardless of cost. It suggested that the platoon might need to fight to reach the objective. This violated fundamental reconnaissance doctrine. Reconnaissance elements gathered information by stealth. When stealth failed, they withdrew. They did not assault defended positions. Kowalski assessed that the mission profile had shifted from reconnaissance to something else, a probing attack designed to test German strength by forcing contact. This was not what his platoon was trained or equipped to do. The risk was disproportionate to the intelligence value. He also recognized that Target A might not exist as indicated on the map. Intelligence in March 1945 was often outdated. German forces were mobile, withdrawing rapidly, repurposing facilities. A railway junction marked as active might have been abandoned days earlier. The mission might be chasing a target that no longer mattered. The decision formed over the 2 hours between receiving the order and the scheduled departure time. It solidified as he studied the map and recognized the disconnection between the stated mission parameters and the operational reality he had observed. By 04:30, he had concluded the mission was not viable. By 04:35, he had decided not to execute it. Kowalski's platoon remained in reserve status for 3 days. They conducted no missions during this period. They maintained equipment, rested, and waited. No explanation was provided for the inactivity. On March 20, They were reassigned to a different battalion and sent north to support operations near Bonn. The railway junction designated as Target A was eventually observed by another reconnaissance element 4 days after Kowalski canceled his mission. The report indicated the junction was abandoned. Rail lines were damaged by previous airstrikes. No German forces were present. The site had no operational significance. Division Intelligence updated its assessments following this report. The area around Target A was reclassified as cleared. No further reconnaissance missions were tasked to that location. The junction did not appear in subsequent operational planning. Kowalski received no formal reprimand for canceling the mission. His decision was not documented in official reports. The battalion operations log for March 17 contains a single entry: reconnaissance mission to target a postponed due to tactical considerations. No elaboration, no explanation. The mission was listed as postponed, not canceled, though it was never rescheduled. Captain Morrison did not mention the incident again. He assigned Kowalski's platoon to routine security duties for the next week. The relationship between Kowalski and Morrison remained professional but distant. No conversations occurred regarding the decision to cancel the mission. Sergeant Hoskins asked Kowalski privately on March 18 why he had canceled the mission. Kowalski said he assessed the intelligence was wrong and the risk was too high. Hoskins asked if Kowalski thought they would have encountered Germans at the junction. Kowalski said he did not know. That was the problem, not knowing. Hoskins did not ask further questions. The men in the platoon did not discuss the canceled mission among themselves in the days following. It became one of many missions that did not happen, postponed, canceled, or superseded by changing tactical situations. The war continued. Other missions occurred. The canceled reconnaissance faded into the accumulation of events. No after-action report exists for the mission to Target A because no action occurred. The written orders Kowalski received were filed in battalion records, but were not flagged or preserved as significant. Routine operations orders from March 1945 were archived in bulk. Most were eventually destroyed as part of standard document retention procedures. Kowalski's decision generated no investigation or inquiry. The battalion commander, a lieutenant colonel, was briefed by Captain Morrison on March 17 about the canceled mission. The briefing was brief. The commander noted the cancellation and moved to other operational matters. No formal action was taken regarding Kowalski's decision. The reconnaissance report filed 4 days later by the unit that observed the abandoned junction did not reference Kowalski's canceled mission. The two events were not connected in official documentation. The report stated observations as of March 21. It did not speculate about previous conditions or what might have been encountered had the junction been observed earlier. Division intelligence assessments from March 1945 show a pattern of overestimating German defensive capabilities in the Remagen bridgehead area. This pattern was recognized at the time, but did not result in systematic revision of intelligence procedures. The fog of war persisted. Estimates were often wrong. Units adapted by exercising tactical judgment at lower levels. Kowalski's use of tactical judgment to cancel a mission he deemed poorly conceived was neither celebrated nor criticized. It was absorbed into the operational background, one of thousands of decisions made by junior officers during the final months of the war in Europe. Most of these decisions left no documentary trace. They existed only in the memories of participants and in the operational outcomes they produced or prevented. The mission that existed only on the map remained on the map. The junction circled in red pencil, the route traced in graphite, the orders typed on official paper. These artifacts existed. The mission itself did not. The gap between plan and execution was total. The mission was conceived, authorized, prepared for, and canceled before it transitioned from potential to actual. Daniel Kowalski completed his service in Europe and returned to the United States in July 1945. He was discharged in November with the rank of first lieutenant. He returned to his home in Pennsylvania and enrolled in college on the GI Bill. He studied civil engineering. He did not maintain contact with men from his platoon. In 1948, he married. He worked as a structural engineer for a construction company through the 1950s and 1960s. He had 3 children. He rarely discussed his military service. When asked, he mentioned that he served in Europe and participated in the Rhine crossing. He did not describe specific missions or decisions. In 1973, he was contacted by a military historian researching the 78th Infantry Division's operations at Remagen. The historian requested an interview. Kowalski agreed. The interview lasted 2 hours and covered general topics: unit structure, daily conditions, logistics. The historian asked about reconnaissance operations. Kowalski described standard procedures, but did not mention the canceled mission to Target A. The historian did not ask about it specifically. Kowalski died in 1991 at age 72. His military records were archived with the National Personnel Records Center. The records document his assignments, promotions, and discharge. They contain no mention of the canceled mission on March 17, 1945. Frank Hoskins, Kowalski's platoon sergeant, remained in the Army and served in Korea. He retired in 1965 as a master sergeant. In a 1982 oral history interview conducted for a veterans organization, he mentioned serving in a reconnaissance platoon in Germany. He described several missions, but did not mention the canceled mission to Target A. He died in 1998. Of the 13 men in the platoon on March 17, 1945, none left recorded accounts specifically describing that date or the canceled mission. Several participated in veterans' interviews in later decades. They described combat experiences, unit life, and general impressions of the war. The night they prepared for a mission that did not occur was not mentioned. The railway junction that was Target A was rebuilt after the war and operated as part of the West German rail network until the 1980s. It was closed and dismantled as rail traffic patterns changed. The site is now industrial property. No historical marker indicates it was once a military objective. A mission drawn on a map, a junction circled in red, orders typed and signed, weapons prepared, routes memorized, a platoon ready to move, a lieutenant who studied the map and decided not to go. The mission existed in all its components except execution. It existed as intention, as plan, as authorization. It existed in the minds of 13 men who prepared to conduct it. Then it ceased to exist, not canceled by higher command, not prevented by enemy action, simply not done. The railway junction remained where it had always been. Whether it held German forces on March 17, 1945, is unknowable. The reconnaissance that would have answered that question did not occur. The junction was observed 4 days later and found empty. What it contained on the night Kowalski was ordered to observe it is speculation. The decision not to execute the mission prevented whatever would have happened had the mission been conducted. Combat, casualties, intelligence gathered, or perhaps nothing. A quiet approach to an empty junction followed by uneventful withdrawal. The outcome remains in the realm of potential because the mission remained on the map. No report documented the decision. No inquiry investigated it. No commendation or reprimand followed. The mission joined the vast category of military operations that were planned but not executed, a category that dwarfs the category of operations actually conducted but receives no historical attention because it produced no observable outcome. Daniel Kowalski sat in a cellar and chose not to send his men toward an objective he believed did not justify the risk. The choice was quiet, personal, and final. The mission stayed on the map. The men stayed in the cellar. Morning came. They returned to their lines. The war continued without the reconnaissance of Target A. The silence is complete. The junction is unmarked. The orders are lost. The decision is unrecorded. The mission exists now only as the space between intention and action, a line on a map that was never traveled, an objective never reached, a report never filed. The mission that existed only on the map remains there still, frozen in planning, never crossing into history.